I love the Silver Age of comic books. It's my favorite period of comics with just genius and insane stories. The Silver Age followed the Golden Age, which birthed the superhero in the pop culture zeitgeist that continues to this day 81 years later. The Golden Age began in 1938 with Action Comics #1 and ended somewhere around the early 50s. The superhero genre began to decline after World War II, and comics focusing on horror, like EC Comics, romance, and crime began to rise and take its place. After a few years of growing contempt for comic books and their creators for their corruption of the children, a concept I'm sure doesn't sound at all familiar to anyone, an old psychiatrist named Frederick Wortham would write and release a book titled Seduction of the Innocent, which declared that which ails America's children is none other than those raggedy, dirty, and lustful comic books. It's coming from a psychiatrist, so it must be true. If Bruce Wayne lives with a boy, they must be gay. Wonder Woman's independence must mean that she's a lesbian. And Superman, the man who in his first ever story stops a woman from being wrongly executed for a crime she didn't commit, stops a wife beater, not the shirt, saves Lois Lane from getting kidnapped, although she is a disgusting independent lesbian that Clark goes on a date with, and finally, when he uncovers a corrupt senator taking money from a lobbyist, he continues to be a hero and puts a stop to their wrongdoing. But oh, this doctor friend that Wortham talked to and agrees with says that Superman is a fascist and un-American, so hey, what can you do? Although, something good that Wortham contributed to was treating black patients at a time when that was just not seen as a good thing. And his findings were cited when courts overturned segregation rulings, such as Brown v. the Board of Education. So, with the parents horrified for their little baby darlings' lives being at stake, the Comics Code Authority was formed. And I believe that it was simultaneously the most restrictive, yet creative factor of comics. In the book Super Gods by Grant Morrison, he writes, "The Comics Code mirrored the Hayes Motion Picture Production Code of 1930, which aimed to transform the racy, intoxicated Hollywood movies of the day into inoffensive, sexless fairy tales." The Comics Code required all comic publishers to submit their works and then be authorized by the CCA, which decided on whether or not the comics were satisfactory for the weak little brains of children. If they were, they got stamped with this handy-dandy little guy, which you may recognize from the beginning of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And if they weren't, well, good fucking luck getting published. Anyway, with these new mandates on what you could and couldn't do, comic writers and artists had to get a little more creative with these inane restrictions, which is why Silver Age comics took a leap from the crime stories of the Golden Age to more just far out. Superhero comics got a lot more science fiction-y, with a big influence from science of the day itself. But seriously, if you want to see science in comics, just go read like any Silver Age Flash story. And this new direction was probably in part due to the big push by Julius Schwartz, who at the time was the editor at DC Comics, and was also a big fan of the science fiction genre and teaching children about science itself. It's typically agreed upon that the Silver Age began in 1956 with DC Showcase #4 presenting The Flash, and ended somewhere around 1970. The Silver Age of DC gifted the world Hal Jordan, Barry Allen, the Justice League of America, the Parallel Earths, and many, many more. While over at Marvel, formerly Atlas Comics, a couple of ragtag guys were sitting in their offices making stories about the Fantastic Four, and giving people amazing and suspenseful tales to astonish. If you want to read a little more on the Comics Code and the Silver Age, or just like comic book history in general, I highly suggest Super Gods by Grant Morrison. It's part autobiography of his life, and part history of the comic book genre, which analyzes superheroes and comes to the conclusion that they are our modern-day mythological pantheon, and symbolic, prescient beings of human society that exist within their own 2D pocket dimension that we created. It's my favorite book. Anyway, enough of the history lesson. Only nerds like that, right? Released in 1965, written by Gardner Fox, with art by Carmine Infantino, this is Detective Comics number 339, Batman Battles the Living Beast Bomb, or Batman Fights a Gorilla. It also features a story at the end with Detective Ralph Dibny, aka the Elongated Man, but I'm not covering that story. The story begins in Gotham City. For 3 days, a criminal who can break open vault doors and leap across rooftops and is really fast has terrorized the city until one night, a scrawny little man runs into the police station and begs them to arrest him. The guy tells the cops to get him into a cell yesterday and to give Batman a ring. Then he gives them his backstory and how he got into the new science called bionics. Editor's note: bionics is the study of living creatures and an attempt to duplicate their special properties. Walter Hewitt wanted to help other weak guys like himself, so he invented a device that harnesses the special properties of animals and transfers them into a human being using the simple power of irradiated light. So he tries it with an eagle and he has supervision. Then he gets super hops from a kangaroo, and eventually he decided to gain the strength of a gorilla. Where is he getting all of these animals from? Does he work next to a zoo? Is he buying them? Anyway, during his gorilla test, he realizes that something went wrong. He gained the gorilla's strength, but the gorilla also gained his thinking ability. Gorillas were pretty big in the Silver Age. I don't really know why. Well, I guess that Walter also had a telepathic ability or something, because the gorilla, named Karmak, starts mentally commanding him to rob places. Because the first thing all creatures do when they form sentience is go out and rob banks. I mean, come on, we all saw Planet of the Apes.
He's out, right?
So, Will concludes that the only time he is free of Carmack's slavery is when Karmak is sleeping, which is why he came to the police. But now, Karmak is waking up, and Will can feel that talking gorilla speaking to him. I think he might just be insane. I mean, we haven't seen Karmak, we're just basing off of what this madman who came into a police station begging to be arrested is telling us at face value. He could just be mentally ill. Then Will rips off the bars of his cell and races out the door. Okay, maybe he's mentally ill with some superpowers. As he crashes out of the front doors, Batman and Robin coincidentally happen to be running up to the station doors. Will tosses the metal bars and evades the Masked Manhunter and the Teenage Thunderbolt and leaps away. But Batman gives chase and leaps off the hood of his Batmobile and slams Will into the ground while delivering a sweet one-liner. Look, this was still early in his career when crime fighting was still somewhat enjoyable. I mean, yeah, crime is bad, but why not have a good time while you're fighting it? It's like when emergency responders have a dark sense of humor to cope with what they're going through and see. Anyway, Will lunges at the cowled Crusader and tries to attack him, but Batman's too quick, so Walter leaps away. Also, I don't know what his real name is. On the DC Wiki page, it says his name is Walter, but earlier in the story he refers to himself as Willie. Batman jumps in the air and catches Walter's ankles and spins him around like a track and field star and just throws him into a solid rock wall. Robin runs up and Batman tells him that they need to get Walter under an anesthetic before he wakes up again. And cut to a brooding gorilla in a laboratory. Karmak wonders how Willie, with all his powers, was still defeated by Batman. Then he comes to the conclusion that Batman is a far better body to enslave than Walter's. Then he devises a plan to sneak out tomorrow night and set a trap. So tomorrow night, with his preparations to the trap made, Karmak just sort of starts strolling around town trying to get Batman's attention. Which he does. Batman rocks up in his Batmobile alone because Robin had to go to a pep rally at his school. Karmak leads Batman through the door of the jewelry store and swings from the chandelier as he thought monologues about how humans stole him from the jungle and imprisoned him in a circus, so now he shall steal their treasures? I thought he was gonna say, like, freedoms or life. or anything other than money and jewels. Batman does some sweet moves and kicks Karmak to the ground, where he is then able to press a floor button, which shoots the irradiated light at each of their bodies. Batman slumps to the ground as Karmak feels Batman's information being inputted into his brain. And later Batman wakes up to find Karmak gone and says, "That gorilla made a monkey out of me." Gorillas aren't monkeys, Batman. They're apes. Monkeys have tails, apes don't. Jesus, with all your wisdom, you still don't know that basic fact? The next day, Batman shows up in short shorts to the jail to find Walter Hewitt under anesthetic. Walter is then awoken and free of Karmak's control, tells them that Karmak will eventually lure Batman back to him because the powers wear off after a few days. Why not just capture Batman and continually suck his powers out of him? Why doesn't this gorilla just suck Batman? Batman says that he'll set a trap for Karmak, and for the next week, Karmak just robs Gotham. Then one night, Batman soaks his gloves in liquid anesthetic before he and Robin prepare to go out. In Gotham City, the crime-fighting duo rolls around in the Batmobile until they spot Karmak hiding behind a tree. Batman gets out, and Karmak races at him as something on his chest clicks. That's right! Karmak has strapped a bomb to himself, and he's already activated it. Also, it can't be shut off or removed. And if Karmak is beaten, it will go off. And it also has the ability to destroy everything and everyone in Gotham except for Karmak. I don't know how that last part works, but whatever, I'm moving on. Batman uses his tried and true method of grabbing his opponent's arm and swinging them into a vertical surface. And while Karmak is dazed, Batman runs up to him and just starts beating the shit out of him. Then, Batman slowly lifts the gorilla because he noticed that when Karmak was in the air, the bomb stopped clicking. Then, Batman overhead presses a 700-pound gorilla, and Robin shouts for him to
"Hold that gorilla, Batman!"
Then, Batman's legs start to buckle underneath the immense weight, so Robin runs over and helps him lift Karmak back up into the air. 30 seconds later, Batman's body finally gives, and he drops the gorilla. But luckily, the bomb died or something, so they're fine. Later, after Karmak has, I guess, been taken also to the jail and put under anesthetic, Batman says that after a few days, he'll be back to being a normal gorilla and will be shipped back to Africa. And then Walter pitifully says that he wishes he could be shipped somewhere that he'd be happy at. And Batman's like,
"Learn to work with other people instead of trying to do everything yourself. Let people know you like them, and they'll like you. I've contacted my friend Bruce Wayne to get you a job at the Alfred Foundation for Scientific Achievement."
"I won't fail you, Batman. I have so much to teach them."
The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode of What Is. If you did, like the video and let me know what you thought of the story in the comments. Also, make sure to check out my monthly podcast called The Cruising Altitude. It involves my friend Saul and me covering every Tom Cruise film month after month. And this month, we watched the classic Risky Business. I also have a Patreon for some reason, which I'll try to be adding more content on soon. I'll see you next time. Bye.